The higher self tends to guide us, it tends to be acting as if from the future often. That's kind of how events in my life have often seemed, foreplanned with forethought, like there's intelligent design behind it. And I caught glimpses of myself acting from future timelines where I actually possess that technology, also from the past, ancient past, where I appear to have those powers. So I was like, yeah, that explains why my life is a constant tailspin, because like all these future selves and past selves and alien agents, they're all warring over this very timeline. And that's why I've been having one Mandela effect after another, like dozens of times in the recent past. Never seen anything like that in my life. Just minutes ago, I had another one. I remembered a message that doesn't exist on this timeline. Otherwise, it would be in my messenger history. But I remember reading it, and I even remember what I thought to respond to it. And then I opened the conversation with my students, and it's no longer there. And I'm like, well, I should tell him probably, because it concerns him, even if it turns out to be just my subjective reality. But since in that conversation he expressed his decision to take up the oath of the abyss, I should tell him.
I definitely know what you mean. Of course, like it's one of those things that has kept me so focused on the mysteries throughout my life, seeing things unfold that just don't, that I don't make sense, because how can this unfold exactly the way I dreamed it 10 years ago? It makes no sense. And if it happens with such frequency as it tends to, if you're paying attention, you want answers, and no one is even willing to ask the questions, at least not in the fields of study that could give us perhaps concrete answers. And I do believe there's concrete answers, because I don't think we live in a supernatural world. As you know, I'm more of a naturalist. I think it's all part of nature. It's all one. It's all God. And but there seems to be, and as an intelligence, this is something I always wrestle with: is spirit an intelligence? Spirits can be intelligences for sure. We even call them intelligences, but is the spirit an intelligence? If there is one spirit of all nature, is an intelligent spirit, or does it exist on, or when we say intelligence, are we talking about a kind of intelligence that just operates so differently it doesn't qualify as a mundane intelligence in the way, for example, our brains do or we do?
I don't think it qualifies as a mundane intelligence in any way. I
No.
mean, I can push myself closer to that higher level insight only through the use of psychedelics. But then you come down from those trips and you're like, okay, well, we are all one. I just saw it. So like, what's the meaning of getting out of the bed in the morning?
Excellent.
These higher mystical insights are wonderful, and they can fix your, the ways that you have your own head up in your ass, your blind spot, but they are also far from our natural perspective for a reason, because these insights they appear to be like less useful, for us in the lives that we live. There was a conversation that I had with Lucifer when I was coming off of the trip, and he said, the reason why experiencing all these emotions and seeing these perspectives which are repressed, they are on the outskirts of your regular consciousness. Well, they are there for a reason, because they are less useful to you. So you come here to visit them, to broaden your consciousness, a state of heightened consciousness, it's called, or like broad awareness. But it's also, if you were in that super broad awareness where all is one, then I guess, like, what's the point of playing the game and reincarnating and stuff? And I want to play the game. Like, I like it here, I don't want to stay there. I don't want to go back to one.
So there does seem, especially of course in psychedelic states, it's very easy to experience that all is one connectedness, and it's even easy to have some understanding of how like pluralistic realities could operate in unity, having crossed that abyss of dichotomy and paradox, being something that is transcendable metaphysically from this realm. Right here we're stuck in Aristotelian land of non-contradiction, right? If something contradicts this, then this isn't true. That's just how it has to be here. If you sort of Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
from a
no, I
strict
get it.
logical
I mean,
point of
in
view.
my ordinary self, I conceive of reality in this primitive way, like it's me, that spirits, they are above me. I need to petition them to get shit, or like they're playing me, they're bullies. It's a very simplistic medieval kind of perspective that we hold in demonology. And when you go into those states, the Luciferian god mind enters me, and we are actually one. And then it speaks to me by embodying like an ex or an ideal lover. And I communicate with him from the position of the subject. And then it's just like everywhere. And in that state, you can even cycle through these perspectives, just like in some dreams. You can either see it from a bird's perspective, you're experiencing the dream as an observer who is kind of omnipresent, or you can shift through different characters and you identify more with certain persons in that dream. So in psychedelic state, you can even like do that intentionally, or see my intentionally. So it definitely helps to snap out of the ego. But then you ultimately come back to yourself, and here you are, and you need to work and pay the rent and interact with the government and with other people. So what good is it to see that we are all one, right? Like, you need to pick a character and play it still.
You got to play the game.
Yeah.
And if there is if our higher selves or divine genius or whatever has a plan for us, we just don't, in this body, in this mind, don't, as get the memos necessarily. And so we get to have this adventure of wandering through the darkness and seeking the light,
Absolutely.
which
And
of course is a
and
different
I
light
had
for.
visions, very, very particular visions about this, where I am basically seeing that I'm a tourist who signed up for a pathworking of hell, the classical Dante's Inferno. And as I am leaving the Ring of Pride, the deepest horrible place to be, I spot that I have this guide in a hood, like the hermit figure from the tarot, and it's Lucifer himself, obviously, and he holds this lantern. And I'm like, wow, so this is what's going on, right? So I think we all signed up for a particular tourist experience, so to speak. And that's why we appear to be making our way through the dark. And yet we always get the signs. Like, we are never like stuck in the dark without any message, without any guidance. The light bringer is always there.
The hermit, of course, very much is a Pythagorean figure in the tarot, and one of the things that interests me about talking to you, because this is our round two, and of course you're in the top 10 most popular episodes ever. I think you might even be in the top 3 right now, and that sort of stuff is definitely part of the game, eh? That's
And
not
that's
just the game; it's
interesting
just a bunch of.
because I
It is
remember.
interesting.
So in the previous reality that apparently also doesn't exist anymore, you told me just a few weeks ago that my episode has absolutely tanked, and now you're telling me that it's trending. So wow, well, that's interesting. Who switched off those two realities?
Yeah, no, it climbed up steadily, and it's in the. I think it's still probably in the top 3. I think part of it is, of course, the popularity of the work you do on your own, of course. And I mean, and the other part of it, I think, is probably that people were interested to hear someone who's like, overtly Christian, right hand path kind of person talking to someone like yourself, who's you know, you are who you are. You need no introduction, I think, at this point. And of course, people can go check out your work for themselves. And your new website's awesome. We'll talk about that more in a bit. But I want to come back to what you mentioned about Dante. And this was one of the things you said you wanted to talk about on this. So I looked at an article on your site about it, and there was the I think it was a recent one. But yeah, the idea of this world being heaven and hell, of Lucifer as the light bringer being like, some people want to see these characters as interchangeable, like, oh, you could worship Lucifer, but it's the same thing as Jesus from a certain perspective, right? Same thing as Pythagoras from another perspective. But we don't, of course, want to conflate them all together, because that doesn't really work out in any way, not intellectually, not spiritually. Maybe it makes sense above the abyss. Maybe it all makes sense in the divine white brilliance of of Ensof or Keter, but down here in the mucky muck, we got difference and distinction.
I love the insult that occultists use to refer to the mundane, the profane, or Malkuthian.
Oh, it wasn't meant to be an insult. It was meant to be when I say mucky muck, I mean like that's the beauty of this world is the mud, is the dirt, it's the earth, it's the plants. The corporality is what's so special. I mean, looking at it even from a very parochial tree of life point of view, the idea of the rapidly spinning point slowing down into matter to express God's glory in even greater form, as impermanent as it is. I mean, what a mind-blowingly beautiful concept. If you were just to share that with someone who'd never heard it before out there in the wilds of the world, right? What a powerful idea. Is the dump truck so loud that you can hear it? Is it dominant? Should we pause for a second? I've been told in the past that actually some people can't even hear those sort of sounds.
No, I'm fine.
Okay.
It's so funny that you refer to this industrial humming sound, because that's how Samael manifests to me. And it now appears on every single phone call that I have with everyone. That industrial humming sound. It has different origins, but it's always there. You're the third person that I'm talking to today where it's appearing.
Well, it's 420. That's when they come to do the garbage, apparently. 421.
Yes, you know, I have invited Samael to do the garbage in my life. That's kind of what he's known for, right?
Mm-hmm. You know, one of the interesting things about Samael that escaped a lot of modern magical books due to lack of information is there's sort of been a bias in a lot of circles, especially some of the Golden Dawn worlds, about Samael being listed as a Klipo, right, as a demon and an evil force, the liar, right, Samael the liar. But then, you know, with the resurgence of missing Golden Dawn literature through people like Zaleski and others, we discovered that the role of the Hieros in the Neophyte temple as Horus changes throughout the initiations and is sometimes even Samael, I believe. So that just sort of throws the idea of this being a dark Klipothic force right out the window in that realm, in the realm of Golden Dawn
my personal gnosis. In my personal gnosis, and this fits some older, you know, Talmudic lore, he is said to be the one who planted the tree of knowledge, who orchestrated the fall of man. Lucifer was just the talking snake. Samael came riding the snake, so he was like using, you know, this other spirit or this medium to enact his own design, his own plan. And that's kind of where my personal gnosis goes. Like, he is here for the big shit. So I would totally see him as the one who starts the higher initiations. That's kind of where I find myself to be now, having abandoned low magic completely, spell work or, you know, manifestation. And yet the reality seems to be shifting like so fast, you know, all these mandala effects. So it is like being torn away from your surroundings, even from your body. And, you know, it's this rising, it's like being taken with an elevator, but it's like a force of nature. He doesn't even appear to me in a humanoid form, but like a hurricane, like a sound of the airplane landing, something massive, something non-human and kind of majestic.
Beautiful, yeah. Well, with the I mean, Samael really is just from I guess a grimoire point of view, an angel of Mars in some ways, or an archangel of Mars. You know, and often equally.
Yeah. He was equated with Nergal, the lord of the underworld, who was, you know, the spirit of Mars in those Near Eastern cultures. But he has so many titles. I recently looked it up, and he's, you know, called the angel of iniquity. He's the angel of death, then he becomes the lord of the shaitans, like the leader of like all the satans, the arch Satan. And in this capacity, he is addressed as the king of hell or the duke of hell, you know, in some alleged medieval sources. So
yeah,
I guess you could perceive him as a lot of different characters. There definitely seems to be tension among the practitioners, whether he is an angel or demon or both. And there seems to be some sort of agreement that he, Lucifer, and Shemyaza in particular would be considered both. Like they actually retain both forms. I have definitely communicated with Samael the demon, the Duke of Hell, the Archangel of Mars, but then with something that was like beyond, that was just magnificent and ancient, and it seemed to predate hell itself or like the presence of Lucifer. So that would, you know, and I think you can perceive these spirits on the level where you want to or where you're ready to. And they kind of tell me this all the time, like, okay, look, you can do the parlor tricks. You can take another pact with Samael, the demon, that you have finished, you know, a decade ago. You gained the stuff that you asked for, you paid the price for it, but you don't necessarily want that again. Like, you want the higher mysteries. So why don't you drop your conceptions of my grimoire self, or even me as the Archangel of Mars, and just experience me as the dark joy of life itself?
How does, in your mind, as you say, turning away from, say, lower magic, focusing on higher magic, how does that connect with the idea of, as you said, Earth, this world being hell? So I'm sort of curious how you see those, how do you navigate those two maps and how you parse them metaphysically?
I think the big thing happens in the gate of Tifereth, the Black Sun. The union with the Black Sun is what I've been seeking for a while. And I've had visions, mystical experiences that seem to confirm this. I had this Black Sun form in my second and third chakra, and then it started expanding and rising within me. So I think that's where I would put it, like on the tree of knowledge. But really, like speaking in mundane terms, it's when you become pissed off at trying to abuse magic to cause external change, to sway the circumstances in your life or the people, or just to gain something for yourself or soothe something, avert something. When you get profoundly disgusted of trying to use magic for all those means, that's kind of where the high magic gate opens. Because before you reach that step, and everybody needs to get there on their own, like you're not rising, you know, you're just filling some hole in yourself, some ego. And you know, I don't think that necessarily all those who claim to be on the path of mysteries, the high magic, are actually on it. You know, that they might be fulfilling their vanity, or, you know, or being lost in some other ring of hell, not knowing it. That's the whole joke about hell that is told in the old paintings. Those people don't know that they're there. They're just like, you know, lounging, having fun, not realizing is in a cauldron that is surrounded by the devils who are having a lot of fun manipulating their little matrix. So until you wake up and actually leave, you know, you're playing a game and you don't realize that. And you can be the most potent magician, the most self-actualized Magister Templi, and you're stuck in some cauldron in, you know, the Ring of Pride, in the Department of Vanity.
Well, you definitely are if you're calling yourself a Magister Templi, I'd say. Though that's coming from someone out of a system that has those grades. Though of course, you know, I don't know who still cares about grades and titles at this point. I mean, you know, it was sort of a thing, it seemed to me, when when we knew less. I think like during this, I was thinking about this the other day, during the times when we had all these more rigid systems and structures coming together over the last, hundreds of years, like let's take from monasticism up through the Golden Dawn and OTO and Crowley's orders, right? And all the 20th century orders. They had all these elaborate grade structures to develop and point out accomplishment, but also knowledge. Often it was pointing out knowledge primarily, in many regards.
There seems to have been a big change even like the past 20 years
Yes, that's what I'm
in
talking
the
about.
Western
Yeah.
occult, and
Yeah.
society has changed profoundly. So it's just a reflection of it. Back then we were all hunting for teachers, grades, initiations. Everybody wanted to join the right group, and we all thought that that's what it boils down to. I think a more individualistic, personal gnosis based approach has taken deep root nowadays, and that's probably because a lot of information is available. Publishing has exploded, the distribution of those books, the internet, big thing. So the gatekeeping does not work like it did anymore. Plus, aren't all the secrets of all the orders on the internet, right?
They're not. I wish they were.
Okay. Well, then there is still mysteries for us to dig, which is good. Like,
Yeah, it is, right? It is. I remember a long time ago, like over 20 years ago, one of my friends was questioning whether he should continue spending time practicing magic or not, and studying these things or not, because that's a question that an early 20-year-old man would ask themselves when trying to decide how they spend their valuable time. And the answer he came to was just life is better with it. The world's more interesting with it, and I enjoy the world more.
it gives us fulfillment that is not easily replaced by any other endeavor, even though I'm guilty of dissuading young men from the occult. Like, I was genuinely sad and torn when one of my old friends, who I always saw him as like the trophy boyfriend, like the most handsome one in the class, the one best in sports, the one who was destined for some glorious career. And then he grew a giant beard, bought some house in the woods, built an alchemical laboratory there, and left society. And I'm like, don't do this to yourself. Like, you should get married and have children and like be the champion. Don't lose your life in the pursuit of the occult out there in the woods. And then he bought 2 wolf dogs, and I know that, okay, well, he's chosen his path. But I genuinely felt like semi guilty for ever encouraging that.
Once you buy the wolf dogs, it's game over. You've committed.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
Well, it's like
You
having
can't go
kids.
back to society with those animals.
I bet. Yeah, I think you had the right idea though, trying to dissuade people, because it is something you should be dissuaded from if you can be. And I don't say that to make a special example out of esoteric practices, but I would say the same thing about writing or music. I mean, you're an artist
Sure.
too, right? So like, if someone asks me about becoming a musician or a writer, the answer is clear. If you can do anything else, do something else, right? But yeah, for it to work out as an artist, you have to not be able to do something else. You have to need to only do
And you have to commit yourself to it and bind yourself with the oath of the abyss, to follow your destiny and reject every other path. And that's a hardcore thing. And I believe maybe that's where the major arcana, the higher mysteries, that's where they start. When you really start caring only about your true destiny and not your ideas. Like, you have wasted every option, every distraction. You have, gone through every vice and every shortcut. And then you're like, well, now it's time for the real shit, because I don't have, the time is limited. Perhaps it has something to do with aging, but it comes at a different point for everyone. Like, you suddenly get this fear almost that you will lose out, and you just stop pursuing the path of uselessness.
path of uselessness. That's how come that frightens me and sounds optimistic at the same time.
Because it's real. I had a friend back in the day who once had a bit of a meltdown before me. He felt like humbled by my attainments, I guess, or my insight. He was older and I was a woman, so I guess it was hurting his male ego. And he said he took a picture for me and he said, "This is, 10 years of my magic journals." And he had all these journals lined up on that piece of furniture, and he proclaimed them useless. Like, I have kept all these journals all these years and I learned nothing. So now I'm gonna toss them because the answer does not lie there.
A lot of people told me to burn my old journals, and
I
so
do it. I
in
discard mine because at the end, like, it's a tool, and becoming attached to it, I think, would be wrong. I have only decided to keep one out of maybe 10 volumes from the past 2 years. And it's because it's like the only sentimental memory I have of my marriage. That's the practice that we recorded there together. So that's why I decided to keep it.
yeah, beautiful. Yeah. Well, as you know, I didn't burn my journals. I decided to make YouTube videos out of them. That's another
You
way to
decided
go.
to immortalize them.
I always sort of eschewed having a circle of personal students, but after 40, it seemed to be sort of okay. That was definitely Rudolf Steiner's thing. He would always say, you can't do that before 40. It wasn't because of a Kabbalah thing at all, or where you start learning Kabbalah at 40, which most people did start learning Kabbalah long before 40, for sure, throughout history. All the great Kabbalists are like 23 when they write their masterpieces and stuff like that. That might not be entirely accurate, but it's not far off. The idea that like, so the idea of your journals being useless, like your friend said, right? Like, I've learned nothing. Like, that's such a, if you don't feel that you've learned nothing, that then you have learned nothing. You need to feel, you should come through it. If you've come through at the other end, you feel it's like when you're finally freed from trauma and it no longer triggers you.
I understand his wrath though, because
Yeah,
it's like
totally.
you feel like you've been a fool, that you've been proven wrong. But this is again you fighting your pride, which it's the mother of all sins, it's the spiritual blindness, the self-delusional entitlement.
Yeah,
And for me, having those journals and keeping them and accepting myself, even though all those spells didn't work out that I recorded, even though all that divination that I noted down didn't come to pass, even though I missed out all these meanings that were obvious, like, it does make you freaking angry because it's a mirror. The
yeah.
journal used to be called the Book of Mirrors in Wicca back in the day.
Rather than seeing myself as having learned nothing from them and having them just be sort of a artifact of the past, I thought I discovered that there was value in going through them and seeing my mistakes and talking about them with others. So using them as a teaching tool, and say like, oh, see how I didn't include any of this information there. That I think, looking at that now, I think that's insane. And and now looking at see this long paragraph, how I described all this stuff, and it took up like a third of the entry. I wish I had that. None of that matters. I should have focused on talking about this and recording this. To me, that's an incredibly useful thing. And of course, I'm a teacher, so it's my vocational calling since I was basically born, is I just love the entire process of education, the whole circular element to it, and the whole process of, like, birth and learning, and then destruction of what then reforming. It's beautiful. And so yeah, so that's what they're for, I guess. The discipline is the most valuable thing I found I got from them, as well as being able to see what things worked well and what things didn't work so well. Like, I was going through one journal and I was looking at the rituals that led up to the biggest challenges I had. Yeah, like I had one real crisis, one sort of magical crisis during all my years in training in the Golden Dawn. And I was like, I never, I lived through it. So I never went back to see what was the ritual work leading up to it. And sure enough, I flipped a page and I saw something. I'm like, what the fuck is that? What
Oh
the fuck
yeah.
is that? And I can't
There, there,
believe what I fucking did. And
there's nothing like realizing that, some major tailspin fuck up in your life was actually fully evoked by you with a certain magical working, unforeseen.
someone said, no matter what, don't do this. And guess what I did? This.
I know what that feels like. That's what we do, like magicians, right? Black magicians and white magicians alike. Somebody tells us, don't do that shit, and we're like, says gates that should never be open. Let's do it.
It was the one and only time I did that. So yeah, learn from my mistakes. If people tell you not to do something, generally you shouldn't do it. But of course, at the same time, we're children and we want to touch the pretty glowing element.
Yeah,
Or like, I remember once I
that's
was
what we
reading
do.
my mom let me have the nightlight on really late once when I was 8 and I was reading my book late at night. And for some reason, I just saw that there was scissors on the desk. So I picked it up and cut the light switch while it was on. I think I was 7 or 8 just to see what would happen. It was pretty scary.
And
I've not
like
fucked with
I
electricity
think
since
that's a
then.
valid motivation to do something just to see what happens, because it's all about that experience. That's why we incarnate. That's the whole point here. You're just filling in the puzzle.
I think it's significant. I like the fact that in the medieval period, spells were called experimenta.
Oh, that's so beautiful. See, if I had approached it this way, I would never become so pissed off, because I approached it as maybe I should have approached it as gambling, which is how demonic pacts were explained to me by Mephistopheles recently. It's a bet. A win is not guaranteed. You play to get the chips to play the game, and then you discover things, and some of your wishes work out the way you imagined. Some work out in a way that you had never foreseen. But it's a bet. You buy the Kinder Surprise. They just plant the eggs. So maybe I should think about it this way from now on.
Yeah, I mean, it's not meant. I don't think the Latin word for it was meant to imply everything that the word experiment today implies. Maybe you would. I think a Latinist would be the only one to answer that definitively. But yeah, I mean, John Dee called his spells actions. Generally, things were called experimenta back then, and I think he didn't call them that specifically because he wanted to distance himself from witchcraft, of course, for so he wouldn't get killed. But yeah, the mentality of experimentation, even spiritually, I think is a healthy one. In terms of hell, if we can say, if there's more to say on Dante and the rings of hell, I'm curious about your ideas of this, about how this world is hell. Why can't this world be heaven?
Oh, well, we live in duality, right? Heaven and hell are organized in mirroring each other, and then they mirror the human society in some way. Like, from what I have discovered, every institution created by man basically mirrors hell, whether it's some of the more obvious ones, such as jail or the courthouse or high school or the strip club. A lot of times practitioners have these dreams about being in hell. It's embodied to them as some kind of profession or institution that they hate, that they have to do it. Like, one of my exes was dreaming about working for the county as a social worker again. And his superiors appeared to be Lilith and Hecate, and Hecate showed him mercy, but Lilith had no mercy for him. So he woke, he wakes up sweating like from the worst nightmare. I've had a female practitioner tell me that she was dreaming about being stuck in some version of hell where she was like forced into prostitution. I was certainly, being privy to like the underworld of the strip clubs and that whole industry in this country. I could totally see how that would mirror the institutions of hell. And then, of course, there is the government bureaucracy, which is perhaps the most infernal of all institutions. It's so absurd what goes on in there. But even anybody who has worked like in healthcare or, you know, education, the army, the police, anybody who gets into the system, a particular institution of society, and stays there long enough to wisen up, they will begin to see the diabolical nature of it, how it just perpetuates suffering. It doesn't fulfill the function that it is supposed to fulfill. It does something else completely, you know. That's kind of the general idea behind it. And like, hell is here. It's obviously not a place that you go after you die, or, you know, it's some place underworld, or that you need to slip through the cracks of some interdimensional gateway. It overlays this reality.
Yeah.
We're in it.
Yeah, and I had a job working for the church just before I graduated. And you know, had things gone differently, I probably would have taken a church and been a full-time priest in the church. But instead, I was working as a director of youth ministries, and the conundrum was hellish. Kids would come to you. Like the first day, I had 2 kids come to me and tell me in the sacristy about sexual abuse with the previous director of youth ministry, who was a 20-year-old girl,
Wow.
and the younger boys. Right away, in the fact, this 10 and 12-year-old girl, yeah, our previous one used to go and close the door and make out with the other boys in there. And I was like, okay, just, you know, I'd been trained, so I took it as it came. I didn't react or anything. It's like, all right, oh wow, oh, you know, first thing I did have them do was then put a big window in the door of my office, and the guy looked at me, the landlord, the Dutch guy who handled the building looked at me with the wide eyes, like, oh yeah, okay. You couldn't believe how quickly I had heard these things, like.
Oh wow.
And then when I heard
so
more
you
things,
you were thrown in hell pretty fast.
but oh, that's not the hell. That's just life. That's just life, unfortunately. And I don't mean to minimize that at all. The hell is when you can't then report it because some of the parents of the kids involved are on the church board, and if you report it, you get fired, and then you can't work anymore.
Oh yeah, man. No, that's
That's
the
the hell.
institutional aspect
No
of it.
action
That's
possible.
hell.
There was nothing
Like,
I could do except just leave, or
yes.
become
Well,
a,
that's the point.
a
You have to leave that ring. You have to leave that cauldron, and, you know, realize what is holding you there.
yeah.
And
Fortunately,
when
I
you
had a
leave that,
PhD offer and the church and
mindset,
just
when
fucked
you
off.
leave that ambition or that vice, you know, that pattern in you, you're released. You cannot fix it. It's like the mythical, you know, like the labor of Sisyphus. It never ends and it can never succeed. It goes on and on in circles. That's why it's called the rings of hell, because things go on in circles there until you snap out of it and then leave.
I often in my imagination just visualize as an exercise all of the Klipothic tree just in Malkut, just like compressed into Malkut, and think about it that way. I like doing weird things with the tree of life, flipping them around on its head just to see how it changes the way I think about things and see if there's any insight.
I think you're totally right. I think all the hells, all the Clifford are condensed around us here, you know, and that hell of religious hypocrisy of the false prophets is definitely one of the deepest ones, because where else should we be finding truth if not in the spiritual pursuit, in the spiritual institution? So when you realize that it's, you know, occupied by high level demons, and that it's all about pretenses and keeping power and money and keeping people in ignorance and keeping some dead traditions alive and just perpetuating something that nobody even knows anymore what the original purpose was, well, you know, that's a bummer when you wake up to that.
I guess
I was fanatical about being a priestess in my early 20s, just like you were. You know, I felt the calling and I was recognized as one with talent. So different churches, different orders, they all wanted me, you know, because they want the pretty front face. They want somebody charismatic that people would follow. But I left them all because I remember precisely the moment that it kind of dawned on me. I was organizing druidic local groves at that point in time, and it was when I was fulfilling one of these quarterly reports, because we were actually a church recognized by the state. Something that back then we really wanted to be. Nowadays, it just seems to be, to me, it just seems so ass backwards that we want
Yeah.
it to be recognized by the state, like to have this legitimacy, to feel that like, you know, like we're worthy. It just seems so childish. But anyway, 20 years
Yeah.
ago in the pagan community, it was a big issue.
Everyone felt that way, I think, in the 90s.
Right? Nowadays, I'm like, what? I don't even want to become a citizen of this country. So I was filling this quarterly report, and it had like a few compulsory aspects to it. And the most important one was you had to report all the activities that you did aimed at recruiting new members. And it was at that point where I was like, okay, so we're basically proselytizing just like the Christians? Fuck that.
Yeah.
Because, you know, it was presented to us that like we want to bless people with the mysteries. That's why we had to master the art of doing a public ritual to get the laity and everybody involved. And I learned a lot about liturgy. You know, it really helped me facilitate circles, witches' Sabbaths. I was doing it for years. You know, how to appeal to all the senses, movements, music, visuals. So I became a good sacred performer. But you know, then I realized that actually, well, why do we need to recruit people? Like, why should we be like advertising ourselves and our worship and our mysteries? You know, shouldn't those who feel the call like find us on their own? Why is the number of members and keeping them and attracting them a measure of like our success? So
For
it dawned on
legitimacy.
me that any spiritual institution, any order, they will never have, they will never be aligned with the goals of an individual seeker, because they will always be A, recruiting new members, and B, collecting membership fees. And then, you know, when they grow big enough, they will become a bureaucratic nightmare of administration.
Hell, okay, I'm with you. I mean, I think anyone who hasn't declared that this world is just freaking hell is lying, right? Most of us have said it at one point or another. It's a human experience, and we have to go through the klipo, right? I mean, they're husks. They're husks, right? They're husks around the grain or the wheat, and whether you see them as the chaff that to be you know, transmuted and cast aside. Do you want to tell people maybe just about your website and the work you're doing and what the vision is behind it,
Sure. No, I
perhaps?
would like to say something about my work.
Yeah, let's do. I'm very interested. The new website looks amazing,
Thank you.
beautifully done, and that's anima-noira at art.
Yes.
www. Yeah,
And,
it'll
and
link below.
it's got a lot of written materials, all of my essays, short stories, poems,
Yeah,
related to the occult, but also, you know, of a different kind, because I'm a writer, apart from being an occultist. I do use it to post extras for my show, The Devil's Disciples, there, because not everything is publishable on social media these days. I got recently flagged for hate speech. So if you want to listen to some Black magicians' hate speech, that's also to be found on my website, as is modeling portfolio. That's also unpublishable in some cases, like the rendering of the Witch's Sabbath that I did. I like to recreate like scenes from the past or my fantasy, my imagination in my photo shoots. And I also have made my spiritual services, my skills available for the public as a part of my ministry. So it's all out there. It went live on Walpurgisnacht this year, brand new. And, you know, you're welcome to hit me up, comment, or follow me across the social media. I'm pretty present there, like daily. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and of course the live streamed show on YouTube.
You do cover a lot of interesting topics on your podcast that people should check out, especially interested in black magic. The packs is an interesting thing to me because it's done. Packs are a thing with white and black magicians, with all magicians. Any kind of time we work with spirits, there's some sort of pact occurring, whether it's explicit or ad hoc, you know. And so that's always an interesting thing, because one thing we have in common is dealing with spirits, and that's something that even people like Rudolf Steiner or Valentin Tomberg considered the most essential thing, is how to communicate with spirits, which is why I find it very ironic that Rudolf Steiner rejected evocational magic, Goetia, and the long history of human technology that is explicitly designed to communicate with spirits. You know, it's funny, right? He's like, the most important thing is communicating with spirits, and I reject all human methods of doing so. Now listen to my clairvoyant insights on it. Like, that was sort of the irony of Steiner and these anthroposophists take on this stuff. And it's a shame, because how we interact with these spiritual creatures is one of the most interesting things in the world to me. And yeah, we all do it. We all do it, whether we define it the same way or not. So yeah, it's been great
Let's keep doing it.
Let's keep doing it. And I wish you all the best on your path and your journey, and best of luck with, especially, yeah, the situation of finding some sort of stability in the country you're in. I know we all want that these days, so I really hope that comes together. I know it will. You're a magician. You can tweak things, fix it in post.
Thank you. I shall.
All right. Thanks for being here, and thanks for listening, everybody. Peace.